So according to the latest economic data, the official inflation rate, and this rate was given to us by the government and their central banker friends, both here in Australia and also in the USA, well, inflation is supposedly somewhere around 7%. And by inflation, I'm talking about the price of goods and services have apparently increased by only 7%. But that's a lie, because if you compared the price of food, gas, and energy to what it was last year, it's at least double that. In some places, the price of beef has risen by 50%, and the price of gas has almost doubled, and the price of fruits and vegetables have risen by a massive 150%, and it's only getting worse. So, how did we get to such a horrendous mess with this never-ending increase in the cost of living while stagnating and in some cases even declining wages? Now, if you ask the government, well, they are blaming COVID-19, of course. They always like to point the finger to anything or anyone but themselves. And these politicians and central bankers continue to lie about inflation being transitory. And they say things like, these high prices are in a transitioning period between COVID and the reopening of the economy, but prices will soon come back down. So it's COVID that's the reason for all this economic pain, and it's killing our economy according to these career politicians. But it's not COVID that's killing the economy. It was the tyrannical overreach in power by politicians who used COVID-19 as an excuse that's killing the economy. I mean, think about it. They forced people not to work and they printed trillions of dollars into existence. And central banks set interest rates at 0% or close to it. Now, whichever economic theory that you subscribe to, you'd agree that that's about as stupid as you could possibly get. And it shows how incompetent the government is when it comes to basic economics. You see, by forcing people not to work and to not be productive citizens into the economy, the supply of the products that workers produce and the services that they provide, well, their goods and services will obviously decline because workers were forced to stay home. And this decline in productivity is exactly why we have massive supply shortages in everything. The construction industry especially is experiencing shortages in every single line of material, whether it's lumber, plasterboard, sand, cement, you name it, and you won't find it because politicians forced workers not to produce it. So this lack of supply has caused huge demand, and huge demand naturally drives prices up. Suppliers across the board were forced to close their doors for 2 years, and politicians made it illegal for them to produce anything under these so-called special pandemic laws. But sadly, business owners still needed to pay their overhead costs that are involved in running their business, which forced them to take on more debt. So after 2 years worth of zero productivity and the added strain of more debt, they need to raise their prices to service that extra debt and to cover 2 years worth of losses. While these politicians gave themselves a pay rise to sit back and spend taxpayers' money while forcing those same taxpayers, the very people who pay their salaries, not to work until they got vaccinated, of course, but to add further strain on the economy. Once the government or the central banks, which are one and the same, knew that business owners took on additional debt, well, they decided it would be the perfect time to raise interest rates. Now, I'm not saying that they should have kept interest rates at zero, although they pretty much are at zero. Australia's interest rate at the time of recording this video is at 0.35%, and that's up from 0.1%. And America's are at 0.75%, and that is up from a flat 0.0%. So very low interest rates. And when Donald Trump, the madman that he is, was in office, he was actually saying that he wanted negative interest rates. Okay, so below 0% is what he was saying, which is crazy. Interest rates should be set by the free market and should never have gotten anywhere near 0%, because having such low interest rates is the reason why we have so much debt in the economy and why asset prices such as real estate and the stock market are in a massive bubble. So central banks, for example, the Reserve Bank of Australia and the Federal Reserve, they set interest rates at 0%. And so banks, mortgage brokers, and every financial institution in between have been loaning out money at these very low interest rates for over a decade. But what is a loan? A loan is debt, and our economy is drowning in debt, and people have overextended themselves by taking on all of this debt at these low interest rates. So we now have a massive oversupply of freshly printed money that's tied to overpriced assets such as real estate, and a massive undersupply of goods, because remember, the government made it illegal to produce anything for 2 years. So with this oversupply of currency, or should I say this oversupply of debt and this undersupply of goods, the price of consumer goods such as food and energy are now also going through the roof because asset prices have topped out. We are in a massive debt bubble. Now, inflation in its original definition is an expansion of the money supply. Prices are affected by money supply. The more money that is printed into circulation, the more debt that's printed into circulation. And the more debt an economy has, firstly, asset prices such as real estate and stocks go up. But now the price of goods and services have also gone up to service all that extra debt. Now, one way to fight rising prices is to raise interest rates, which is what central banks are starting to do now. But these minimal rate hikes are still far too low to fight this out of control inflation. And even the slightest increase in interest rates is causing a catastrophe. Businesses here in Australia are dropping like flies after they've been hit with a full can of fly spray. ProBuild, Metricon, Dildan, these were billion-dollar construction companies that have all gone bankrupt. And every day that goes by, I'm hearing more and more news about so-called blue chip companies that are on the verge of collapse. And the only ones that should be blamed are the politicians who closed down our economy. They are solely responsible for these companies going bust and for what's about to come, because this current demand for supplies will soon come to an end, as it has now become much more expensive to run a business. By closing down the economy for 2 years, construction companies priced future projects based on the price of materials before COVID-19. And as we know, prices have since skyrocketed, so future projects are being cancelled due to the cost of materials going through the roof, which means the jobs created to serve these projects will no longer be there. Tradesmen and laborers won't be needed to build these projects. The businesses who supply construction materials will have no future projects to look forward to, which means layoffs in the supply chain. Accounting and law firms will no longer be needed, so that industry will also take a hit, and the lack of jobs means there will be lack of spending in the retail sector, so it's not looking good, folks. I think we are heading for a depression.